Recently, President Donald Trump offered to send U.S. Special Operations personnel to assist Mexico with its drug cartel problems, and the current president of Mexico declined that offer. This refusal of assistance is because the cartels run the government of Mexico, and not the president, police, or even the military. And President Claudia Sheinbaum is either in fear of cartel retribution or she is complicit and on the payroll. Cartels have their own armies, their own territories, and in many places, they've replaced the government. These aren't just criminals, they're warlords. So how did Mexican drug cartels come to control entire regions of a sovereign nation? Let's find out. How did the cartels take over the Mexican government? Which cartels are involved and how many are there? What is the reason for the Mexican government being unable to stop them?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
The cartels in Mexico have controlled the country for over 3 decades now in a ruthless war waged against government officials, average civilians, and even foreign tourists. Politicians, police officials, and mayors who challenged their authority have been assassinated, along with family members either killed or threatened. Many officials were hired and worked for the cartels. This reign of terror, as well as the cartels bribing officials, has allowed this to occur and even expand. Their actions include not just drug smuggling, but also weapons and human trafficking, which was a multi-billion-dollar business under the Biden administration when they opened the southern border. Attacks against foreigners in Mexico have raised significant concerns in recent years, with certain areas experiencing increased violence affecting tourists and expatriates. Most of these cases go unsolved, either due to the lack of investigative resources available to police or the corruption having infiltrated into law enforcement, giving the criminals cover. The impact of the cartel's activities have severely impacted American citizens, from drug overdoses due to fentanyl to violent crime, including murder. What is shocking is the indiscriminate nature of the crimes and the victims themselves. Recently, American citizens being targeted in Mexico elevated concerns, although not enough to encourage the Biden administration to do anything about it. One victim was a DEA agent's wife, Nico Hanbarkish, who was killed in February 2024 after being caught in the crossfire during a shootout between alleged drug dealers at a beach club in Tulum. In Baja California in April 2024, Australian brothers Jake and Callum Robinson, along with American friend Carter Rode, were reported missing during a surfing trip. Their bodies were later discovered in a well, each with gunshot wounds to the head. Authorities believed they were victims of a robbery attempt that escalated. In November 2024, 2 Colombian migrants were shot dead by Mexico's National Guard near Tecate. The incident occurred on a known migrant smuggling route. Many dead immigrants have been found without identity papers, so their countries of origin are unknown. California couple Gloria Ambers, 50, and Rafael Cardona, 53, were fatally shot while vacationing in Anacamasitiro, Michoacan, in December 2024. Their vehicle was ambushed by gunmen, and Ambers died at the scene, and Cardona succumbed to his injuries later. The motive remains under investigation by Mexican authorities, so we will not hold our breath. But Mexico is a true banana republic, despite some honest, hardworking people in law enforcement and the military trying to clean up the country, but they will never succeed without U.S. assistance. The cartels are too large and too powerful, and with military weapons and capabilities that rival many small nations. The greatest part of the problem is corruption. Several high-ranking Mexican government officials have been implicated in corruption and collusion with drug cartels. But many people will ask, how does the Mexican government fail to control these towns and cities? The reason is that the cartels are the law, either by public profile or by owning the local police and politicians. Besides drugs, human trafficking, and weapons, they operate prostitution, protection rackets, gambling, and they tax businesses, appoint their own police chiefs, and even control mayoral elections to put their surrogates in office. A recent report found that in over 30% of Mexico, the government either shares control with cartels or has no control at all. Multiple presidential candidates have been accused of accepting drug money. Here are some notable cases. Genaro Garcia Luna, the Secretary of Public Security from 2006 to 2012, under President Felipe Calderon, was convicted in the U.S. for accepting millions in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel, engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, making false statements, facilitating drug shipments, and providing sensitive law enforcement information to the cartel, which also compromised U.S. DEA assets. He was sentenced to 38 years in U.S. federal prison. Jesus Gutierrez Rebolo was a Mexican Army general and head of the National Institute to Combat Drugs from 1996 to 1997, and he was arrested after evidence surfaced of his collaboration with drug traffickers. He was convicted for aiding drug lord Amado Carrillo Fuentes of the Juarez cartel, initially sentenced to 31 years, later increased to 40 years in prison. Tomas Yarrington was the governor of Tamaulipas from 1999 to 2004, and he was arrested in Italy by Interpol in 2017 and extradited to the U.S. in 2018. He pled guilty in the U.S. to money laundering and accepting bribes from the Gulf and Los Zetas cartels. U.S. District Judge Rolando Olvera sentenced Yarrington to 108 months imprisonment. Julio Cesar Godoy Toscano was a federal deputy in 2009 and the half-brother of Michoacan Governor Leonel Godoy. He was accused of working for the La Familia Michoacana cartel, money laundering, receiving funds from drug lord Servando Gomez Martinez, and he used his personal position to protect the cartel. He has been a fugitive since 2010. Jose Luis Abarca Velasquez, the former mayor of Iguala, Guerrero, from 2012 to 2014, along with his wife Maria de Los Angeles Pineda, were implicated in the murders of 6 people on the night of September 26, 2014. They were accused of ordering the disappearance of 43 students from the Ayotzinapa Teacher Training College in 2014. They were handed over to the Guerreros Unidos drug gang to be killed by the local police who were also on the cartel payroll. They were arrested in Mexico City on November 4, 2014 and are still awaiting trial in collusion with the Guerreros Unidos cartel. Ironically, just 2 days after he took office, former Mexican President López Obrador had signed a decree to create a super commission to conduct a new investigation into the case of the 43 missing students, which never happened. These cases underscore the challenges Mexico faces in combating corruption and cartel infiltration within its political and law enforcement institutions. Many politicians, over a dozen, have been murdered for not following the cartel game plan. Just a few examples are Alejandro Arcos, mayor of Chilpancingo, Guerrero, was found decapitated in October 2024. Yolanda Sanchez, municipal president of Cotija de la Paz, Michoacan, was killed in a drive-by shooting on June 3, 2024. Floricel Rios Delfin, mayor of Yamapa, Veracruz, was abducted and murdered in November 2020. Maria Santos Gorstieta Salazar, former mayor of Tequecho, Michoacan, was abducted and killed in November 2012 after surviving multiple assassination attempts. Several police chiefs were also targeted, such as Victor Hugo Padilla Nava, police chief of Palica, Guerrero, who was assassinated on July 12, 2019. Oswaldo Garcia Vallejo, police chief in Yolsotitlan, Jalisco, was killed on May 31, 2020. Benito Aguas, federal congressman from Mexico's ruling coalition, was shot and killed in Zongolica, Veracruz in December 2024. There were many others. So how do these cartels keep getting away with high-profile murders of politicians? The answer is simple. Mexico is home to some of the most powerful and violent criminal organizations on earth. These cartels don't just traffic drugs. They run extortion rings, human smuggling operations, illegal mining, and in some cases, entire cities. So, let's break down the two most dominant, successful, and violent cartels in Mexico. The Sinaloa cartel is the most powerful and influential on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Founded in the late 1980s and made infamous by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Sinaloa cartel is one of the oldest and most established. Even after El Chapo's arrest, the cartel remains strong and still operated by his sons, known as Los Chapitos and El Mayo Zambada, a shadowy figure who's never been arrested. Sinaloa operates like a multinational corporation operating in 50 countries with deep partnerships with Chinese fentanyl suppliers. The CJNG, or Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, was founded by a former police officer, Nemesio Osguera Cervantes, or El Mencho, and this cartel exploded onto the scene in the 2010s. Like Sinaloa, they use fear, intimidation, murder, and have access to military hardware including drones, rockets, IEDs, and armored vehicles. Both cartels are known to use IEDs as part of their method of assassinating public officials. The CJNG is currently the fastest growing cartel and well represented in over 2/3 of Mexico's states. But why is it so hard to take them down, as was done with the American Mafia? The problem is that, according to a retired DEA agent, when major cartel leaders are killed or captured, their organizations don't disappear, they splinter, reorganize into smaller cells, and many of them break off and create a new cartel. This creates rivalries, but in some cases, it creates business partnerships. The only way for this to be so effective for so long is the corruption in the Mexican government, either through intimidation or by being bought. That's why Mexico now faces dozens of smaller factions, all fighting for control. These splinter groups also include the remnants of Los Zetas, which was a cartel founded by former elite soldiers, known for their brutality and tactical capabilities, and the Gulf Cartel, once dominant on the border, but now severely weakened by internal feuds and the arrest of many of their government surrogates. So what's being done today? The Mexican military now manages internal security with over 100,000 soldiers deployed domestically. Former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador launched his National Guard to join the police to supposedly combat the problem. But his critics say it never worked because they could never get to the root of the problem, and Obrador was accused of working with and protecting the cartels, and his forces never deployed in sufficient numbers or in tactically important areas to effectively combat the cartels. But the USA has tried to help over the years, and the relationship between the DEA and the Mexican government has been a complex mix of cooperation, mistrust, conflict, and outright betrayal. The operations were shaped by decades of joint efforts to combat drug trafficking and repeated breakdowns caused by corruption, sovereignty concerns, and political shifts. From the 1980s to 2000s, US and Mexico engaged in robust anti-drug collaborations. The DEA worked very closely with Mexico's federal police and military to dismantle major cartels. DEA agents were embedded in Mexico and operated with relatively open access after coordinating large-scale drug seizures, arrests, and intelligence gathering. That was until the 1985 kidnapping, torture, and murder of DEA agent Enrique "Kiki" Camarena by cartel operatives, allegedly with the assistance of corrupt Mexican officials. The murder led to Operation Leyenda, the largest DEA homicide investigation in history, and U.S. trust in Mexican law enforcement was deeply damaged. DEA operations became more cautious, and relations remained tense for years. However, this discord was not always the case, such as the post-9/11 era, which saw renewed collaboration between both nations under former Presidents Vicente Fox and Felipe Calderon. DEA and Mexican security forces collaborated closely, especially during the militarization of Mexico's drug war. For example, the Merida Initiative of 2008 funded billions in U.S. aid to Mexico for equipment training and intelligence sharing. But there was a problem. Mexican federal agencies, including elite drug units, were repeatedly infiltrated by cartels. It was later learned that DEA agents were unknowingly working alongside compromised Mexican officials, which endangered the agents and reduced effectiveness. Under President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, things began to fall apart as his party, the AMLO, adopted a nationalist stance and limited DEA activities within Mexico, effectively neutering the agency. In 2020, things became even more complicated and created a diplomatic crisis when former Mexican Defense Minister Salvador Cienfuegos was arrested by the DEA in Los Angeles on drug trafficking charges after an investigation that spanned several years. The Obrador government was furious over the U.S. not giving Mexico advance notice, and they demanded his return, so the DOJ under Biden dropped the charges, and then Biden opened up the border to the cartels. Strange coincidence. As a result, Mexico passed legislation severely restricting foreign agents, including the DEA. Agents must now report all activities and share intelligence with Mexican authorities, raising fears of leaks and being compromised. After Biden opened the border and allowed an estimated 20 million illegals into the country, the traffickers had a field day, especially the cartels over smuggling people and fentanyl into the country. Most of the fentanyl killing Americans is produced in cartel-run labs in Mexico. But there were some politicians who stood up and challenged the cartels. One such woman was Yolanda Sanchez, the mayor of Cotilla, who reportedly received death threats after taking up office in September 2021. She had taken a hard line with the criminal elements. She was kidnapped in 2023 and held for 3 days in Jalisco, and she said that her kidnappers made demands and inflicted psychological terror before releasing her. They were apparently making a point that she not interfere in their operations. The most likely culprits were the Jalisco New Generation cartel, and Sanchez had said that the men who had threatened her after she had taken office had demanded that she hand the security of the town over to state police officers in the pay of organized crime groups. She bravely refused and asked for the military to reinforce the town, but she was provided with armed bodyguards. But she was given no government protection by the new president, Sheinbaum, and she was ambushed by gunmen in the center of Cotilla, Michoacan. She was shot 19 times and died in hospital shortly after the attack. Her bodyguard was also killed in the battle. The failure of Sheinbaum to offer protection, as well as her refusal to accept U.S. military assistance, has raised suspicions about her possible involvement with the cartels. No arrests have been made so far in connection with the attack, and few doubt that under President Sheinbaum, any investigation will bear fruit. The cartels would not like that. There is no proof that Sheinbaum is in the pocket of the cartels, but time will tell, and her recent actions do not help her image. Sheinbaum was the first woman and first Jew elected as president who defeated an extremely popular opponent, Xochitl Galvez, in a landslide but very questionable election victory in 2024 that saw around 40 political rivals running for various offices murdered. Dozens more were intimidated, but amazingly not Sheinbaum. While Ms. Galvez conceded defeat after Sheinbaum's unquestioned lead in the polls was announced, she has since described the campaign for the presidency as an unequal competition against the entire state apparatus dedicated to favoring its candidate. She was referring to the cartels. The election was full of corruption, and the cartels apparently got their woman into office. This would explain her hands-off approach to cleaning up her country and her vocal opposition to President Trump demanding that she reintroduce the Remain in Mexico program and seal her southern border. The war for Mexico isn't just a drug war. It's a war for political, economic, and military control. And right now, it's a war the cartels are winning. Until governments tackle the corruption and chaos at the root of the problem, the bloodshed won't stop. There seems to be no end in sight to the cartels running the country and the internal political corruption that allows it to happen.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.